They said the war was fought in trenches and skies, but beneath it all was another battlefield. One of shadows, lies, and unspeakable choices. This isn't the history they teach you. This is the truth they tried to bury. Too dangerous, too twisted, too real. Step carefully, because once you enter, there's no unseeing what lies behind the veil. The air in Warsaw was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that came not from peace, but from fear. Nazi boots echoed against cobblestone alleys, Gestapo checkpoints choked the city's arteries, and every word not spoken in compliance risked arrest, torture, or worse. But in the darkness of that silence, a voice emerged. A voice that defied, that whispered hope. A voice from nowhere, and everywhere. They called it the Ghost of Warsaw. The first broadcast came late one September night in 1943. Static crackled through forbidden radios as the signal cut in, wavering, then clear. A piano played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Then, a soft but unyielding voice, unmistakably Polish, began to speak. This is Warsaw. Still alive. Still breathing. Still ours. At first, German authorities assumed it was Allied propaganda dropped in from the airwaves. But no known station matched the frequency. The signal was too clean, too local. The SS scoured the city for hidden transmitters, arresting students, teachers, even electricians. No one knew, or no one dared say, who was behind the voice. In truth, the Ghost of Warsaw was a girl. Zofia Chaika was 17. Once a theater student at the Państwowy Instytut Sztuki Teatralnej, she now swept floors in a Nazi-controlled factory by day and wove words of defiance by night. Her father had been executed during the ghetto uprising. Her mother vanished into the maw of Auschwitz. Left with her younger brother Tadeusz, Zofia had joined the resistance in the only way she could, with words. Hidden beneath a ruined bookstore in the old town, Zofia and a blind sound engineer named Jerzy Rakolski had built a transmitter from salvaged Wehrmacht parts. Jerzy, once a radio host in peacetime, had lost his sight during the siege of Warsaw but not his ear for frequency or timing. They worked in shifts, rotating power from a bicycle-powered generator, guarded by the resistance's owls, messengers too young to fight but too brave to sit still. Each broadcast was a dagger in the Nazi narrative, slipping into homes through smuggled radios, poems of resistance, names of executed citizens, updates from London via encoded messages read aloud. The voice was always calm, never shouted. It whispered to those afraid to speak, and people listened. Within months, the ghost became legend. Polish families set their clocks by the signal. In secret apartments, whole blocks fell silent at 2200 hours to catch Zofia's latest words. Her poems were repeated like scripture. The Nazis responded with fury. More curfews, more public hangings, posters offering rewards. No one came forward. But legends make enemies. In December, a traitor in the resistance gave the Gestapo a location, one of the relay spots. The raid missed Zofia by hours but caught a courier, a boy of only 12. They tortured him. He didn't break. He was found hanging from a lamp post 3 days later, a sign around his neck. This is the price of treason. Zofia read his name on the next broadcast. Slowly, carefully. Maximilian Piatek, age 12. He did not speak. He is not forgotten. And so, the Ghost of Warsaw became more than a symbol. She became a weapon. But the war changed. The Soviets were advancing. The resistance was splintering. Some wanted to rise up before the Red Army arrived. Others feared a second occupation, this time by Stalin. Zofia kept to her broadcasts, though the words grew harder to find. She hadn't seen the sun in weeks. She ate bread once a day. Her hands shook from cold and fatigue. One night, Tadeusz didn't return from a ration run. She waited hours, then days. Finally, a resistance courier brought her word. Her brother had been picked up in a sweep and taken to Pawjak prison. A week later, another message. He was alive, but the Gestapo had made it known they would kill him publicly if the Ghost of Warsaw didn't reveal herself. Jerzy told her not to act. The resistance couldn't lose the voice. "There are always more brothers," he said coldly. "There is only one you." She punched him. That night, Zophia's voice didn't broadcast. The following evening, the static returned. Jersey, now manning the controls alone, waited in dread. Then the voice came, not live, but recorded. She had prepared the message in secret, knowing the moment might come. "If you hear this, I am likely gone. But remember, I was never one person. I was all of us. I was every whisper behind a closed door. Every hand that passed a secret note. Every child that remembered a name. Every mother who risked her life to tell the truth. If they silence me, pick up your voice. Say what must be said." That was the last anyone ever heard of her. Pauillac prison burned days later under mysterious circumstances. Today Ausch was never found. Nor was Zophia's body. Some say she was shot during an escape attempt. Others claim she fled east disguised as a Soviet nurse. Jersey died in the uprising that followed, gunned down in the streets with a pistol in one hand and a microphone in the other. After the war, rumors spread that Radio Free Europe had picked up her broadcasts in their archives. But the tapes vanished. Warsaw was rebuilt. The bookstore was leveled. The basement filled in. Still, sometimes, on certain frequencies in the dead of night, resistance veterans claim they can hear piano notes beneath the static. A voice, not quite real, not quite memory. This is Warsaw. Still alive. Still breathing. Still ours. In the waning months of 1944, as Nazi Germany's death grip began to falter, the Allies uncovered a whisper from inside Bavaria. Not a military whisper, no troop movement or panzer column, but a scientific one. A rumor of something darker than the V2. A missile beyond anything Wernher von Braun had built. One that could cross the Atlantic. Its name was Project Daedalus. The tip came from a double agent embedded in the Abwehr, smuggled through Sweden to London, and finally decrypted by American intelligence. The OSS, already stretched thin by covert operations across Europe, scrambled to form a retrieval team, not to destroy the weapon, but to steal it. At the heart of the mission was a name that hadn't appeared in any Allied dossier before, Dr. Elke Niemann. She was an enigma. A physicist in her 30s. Graduate of Göttingen. Former assistant to Werner Heisenberg. She had vanished from the academic world in 1939, her work deemed classified. The Nazis never put her in propaganda posters. No photos. No speeches. But according to the Abwehr whisper, she had developed guidance systems far more precise than anything the Third Reich had tested. If her missile succeeded, New York or Washington could burn before Christmas. In early January 1945, a four-man OSS team parachuted into the Austrian Alps, disguised as Wehrmacht engineers. They trekked north through snow-thick valleys and frozen pine forests until they reached the outskirts of Leitenwald, a remote village rumored to house the Daedalus facility beneath a textile mill. What they found wasn't a bunker, but a monastery. Benedictine monks moved silently through candle-lit halls. Beneath the chapel floor, sealed behind iron doors, the rocket lab whirred like a heart. Tesla coils hummed. Crates marked Wunderwaffe lined the corridors. And at the center, working amid chalkboard equations and half-assembled components, stood Dr. Niemann. She did not run when the OSS agents revealed themselves. "I've been waiting," she said. She had no love for Hitler. Her family had been Aryanized Jews, her father executed during the Night of the Long Knives. Her compliance had been survival. But in secret, she had sabotaged the Daedalus project. Its fuel was unstable. Its trajectory algorithms flawed. The Nazis didn't know. They were planning a launch within 2 weeks. "You want to steal it?" she asked the OSS lead, Agent Marcus Voss. "You're fools. If you fail, they'll fix it. And then you'll be too late." Voss made a snap decision: destroy the prototype and exfiltrate Niemann. But the rocket was already being moved, loaded onto a train headed to Peenemünde for final testing. With Nazi forces collapsing, The Soviets and Americans were closing in from both sides. Time was a fuse. The team split. Two agents stayed to destroy what they could of the lab. Voss and Niemann pursued the train. In the freezing dawn, they hijacked a supply truck and raced west, intercepting the Daedalus transport near Ravensbrück. Niemann climbed aboard mid-motion, rewired the ignition, and detonated the fuel tank. The explosion cracked the sky. Metal rained over the valley. The prototype was gone. But the SS had seen them. The chase led through abandoned hamlets and burned-out forests. Voss and Niemann eventually crossed into American lines near Nuremberg, barely ahead of the Soviet advance. She was interrogated for weeks, shuttled between bases, pressed for everything she knew. Then she disappeared. Officially, Dr. Elke Niemann never existed. Unofficially, she was transferred under Operation Paperclip, a secret American initiative to recruit Nazi scientists before the Soviets could. Unlike von Braun, she never appeared in NASA press releases. Her name never adorned any American facility. But her guidance systems appeared, first in the Redstone missile, then in Polaris, and finally in early ICBMs. Agent Voss never saw her again. Years later, he received a letter postmarked from Los Alamos, and signed but typed in a familiar style. It said only, "Daedalus was meant to fall, not to fly." The myth of the transatlantic Nazi missile became a Cold War ghost. Soviet intelligence dismissed it as Western exaggeration. American historians redacted it from public records. The monastery was converted into a sanitarium. The textile mill became a factory for dishware. But among rocket engineers in classified circles, her name still floated like a specter. Elke Niemann, the woman who killed a missile, and in doing so, may have stopped the first atomic retaliation before the bomb was ever dropped. In 1995, a declassified memo surfaced briefly online before vanishing again. It included a line from Niemann's original design journal, translated from German. "If Daedalus rises, no man will fly again without shadow. It must fall into myth, not history." It did. Rain. Endless, rotting rain. It soaked uniforms, rusted rifles, and turned the Burmese jungle into a vast, living organism, breathing, choking, whispering death. This was no war of glory. No tanks rolling across open plains or triumphant marches down city streets. This was the Forgotten Front, and in its heart moved the Ghost Division. They weren't listed in official orders. No insignia marked their uniforms. No commanding officer in London or Delhi admitted to knowing of them. They were shadows in the mist, drifters, outcasts, expendables. But to the men fighting and dying in the jungle, they were something more, a last, desperate attempt to bring the war to Imperial Japan in the impenetrable wilderness of Southeast Asia. It began in 1942, after the fall of Rangoon. The British were in full retreat. The Japanese swept through Burma like fire through dry leaves. Chiang Kai-shek's Chinese divisions faltered, and Allied strategy collapsed into chaos. Amid the confusion, a British major named Clive Hawthorne took 42 men, British, Gurkhas, African medics, Anglo-Indians, even a few deserters, and vanished into the jungle rather than follow retreat orders. They called themselves the Ghosts. Major Hawthorne was not a man given to speeches. A veteran of the Great War, he had a limp from Gallipoli and eyes like stone. He saw the jungle not as terrain but as a weapon, one he could turn against the invaders. The Ghosts didn't fight pitched battles. They ambushed supply columns, sabotaged airstrips, and melted back into the green. They spoke in whispers, fought in silence, and left no bodies behind, only empty boots and scorched crates. Their reputation grew in myth among Allied troops. "Leave supplies in the valley north of Kalai," a wounded pilot once said. "The Ghosts will find them." But with each month, the war ground them down. Malaria claimed more lives than bullets. Leeches, dysentery, jungle rot. Insects crawled into wounds and laid eggs. A Gurkha named Dambar lost both feet to infection but insisted on dragging himself with a knife between his teeth for one last raid. He died smiling after planting explosives beneath a Japanese tank convoy. Their medics were led by Corporal Godfrey Ebo, a Nigerian field nurse who kept a journal in palm leaves. His entries would later be found by a Royal Indian Army patrol. Day 114. Rain constant. We have no quinine. Jacob hallucinated and walked into the trees. Haven't seen him since. No time to bury the others. We burn the dead now. The jungle forgives nothing. The division's most legendary operation came in late 1944, deep in Japanese-occupied territory near Myitkyina. The Ghosts had intercepted chatter about a Japanese communications outpost that linked regional command to Tokyo via coded Morse. If severed, it would blind a quarter of the enemy's jungle operations. The Ghosts moved silently for 9 days. No fires. No talking. They drank from vines and ate stolen rice. On the 10th night, they struck. One survivor from the outpost later told his interrogators, "They came like wind. No sound. No warning. One moment, we were drinking tea, the next, everyone screaming, burning. I never saw a single face." The Ghosts destroyed the outpost, leaving no trace of themselves behind except a message carved into bamboo in 5 languages. We were never here. But their victory came at a cost. Japanese reinforcements hunted them with dogs and aircraft. One by one, the Ghosts disappeared. Some were caught. Some turned feral in the jungle and never returned. Some were buried beneath leaves, marked only by a bayonet in the soil. Major Hawthorne's final report, smuggled to Allied command by a Gurkha runner with a bullet in his lung, read only. Objective complete. No further action possible. Ghosts remain. No further contact was made. After the war, the British government refused to acknowledge the unit's existence. Their missions had been unofficial, their actions politically inconvenient amid negotiations with the new Burmese independence movement. No medals were awarded. No memorials built. Names of the fallen vanished from records. But the jungle remembered. Villagers along the Chindwin River still tell stories of white-skinned spirits and knife-carrying men who saved them from Japanese patrols. In 1973, a Japanese veteran returning to pay respects at a former camp found a rusted dog tag nailed to a tree. EBO, G. Medic, Ghost. In 1991, a former British intelligence officer privately published a memoir titled Phantoms in the Green. It was quickly suppressed but spoke of a man named Clive who swore to fight until the jungle swallowed him. The book included a single blurred photo, 7 men in ragged uniforms, faces obscured by dirt and vines, posing beside a burned Japanese radio tower. No unit insignia. No identifying marks. Just shadows in the mist. The Forgotten Front had many casualties, but none more invisible than those who chose it willingly, who abandoned rank and recognition to become what the war needed in its darkest, least visible corners. They were never honored. They were never found. But they were there. The jungle does not lie. She arrived with a violin case and a limp. Her papers read, Marie Delacour, French, age 32, seamstress, political prisoner. The SS guards barely looked at her. Another sack of bones for Ravensbrück, the women's concentration camp northeast of Berlin. Another mouth to feed. Another body to break. But Marie was not who she seemed. Her real name was Sylvia Kent. Born in Manchester. Graduate of Cambridge. Cellist. Polyglot. Linguist. Recruited in 1941 by the British Special Operations Executive for her talent in mimicry and her mastery of languages, Sylvia had trained under the infamous Black Sparrow's sabotage program. Her mission was codenamed Nightingale. She was to enter Ravensbrück willingly, infiltrate the administrative block, and retrieve 2 names, high-ranking German doctors responsible for human experimentation. These men had gone silent and vanished into the SS Black Vaults. The Allies believed they were continuing Mengele-style atrocities inside the camp, using women as guinea pigs to test biological weapons resistance. Sylvia was to find proof. She knew it would be a one-way mission. In January 1945, as the Eastern Front closed in, she was arrested in Paris under an alias and sent to Ravensbrück via cattle train. The cold clawed at her lungs, and the air stank of death. She did not weep. She did not speak. She watched. Inside the camp, her limp, an old sprain re-aggravated for disguise, kept her from heavy labor. She was assigned to sewing uniforms, where she quietly mapped prisoner movements, memorized shift rotations, and tracked the arrival of certain SS officers. Her cover was perfect. Her accent flawless. Her silence expected. But what none of her handlers had anticipated was the music. Each Sunday evening, the guards demanded entertainment. A crude morale ritual. Prisoners with instruments, voices, or tricks were ordered to perform in exchange for scraps of bread or slightly warmer blankets. Sylvia kept her head down until one week, a Polish woman collapsed before a performance, and the commandant demanded a replacement. A violin was thrust into Sylvia's hand. She hadn't played since before the war. She played Ave Maria. The notes bled into the bitter night, haunting and raw. Guards froze. In the back rows of prisoners, women wept quietly. From that night on, the SS called her Die Nachtvogel, the night bird. She was made to play every Sunday, and so she watched and listened. She saw a tall doctor with silver glasses and gloves that never bore stains. He never gave his name. He spoke fluent Russian and kept a diary he never let out of his sight. Through scraps of overheard German, French, and Czech, Sylvia learned he was referred to only as Dr. Raucher, the smoker. But he never smoked. He wore a gold ring, though. Odd for a doctor. She noted it. Each week she played, and each week she watched him escort women into the Eastern barracks. They never returned. The other prisoners whispered of infections, injections, tests that burned the veins from the inside out. Sylvia got close. She feigned illness, got herself transferred to the infirmary wing. There she found what she needed: coded ledgers, initials beside test dosages, and two names buried deep in requisition orders. Dr. Otto Raucher and Dr. Anton Kessler. Both had been reassigned after being denounced at Nuremberg's pre-list. She stole the codes, memorized the format, and passed the info through a chain of contacts, coded into sheet music, hidden in the folds of concert programs smuggled out by a civilian laundress. But her contact was compromised. In March 1945, her bunkmate was dragged from the sewing room. She didn't scream. They found a small scrap of Mozart tucked into her waistband, with dots punched in a pattern. Morse. The SS panicked. They suspected a spy but didn't know who. They cancelled Sunday performances. They increased interrogations. Women vanished overnight. Sylvia prepared to die. Then came the bombing. The Soviets advanced faster than expected. The SS began burning files. Trucks rolled out of the camp nightly. Dr. Raucher was seen boarding one, briefcase clutched tight, coat spotless. Kessler had already gone. The camp was collapsing. Sylvia had one chance. She broke into the infirmary records room during a power outage. The camp swirled in smoke and panic. She found Raucher's notes, names, dates, dosages, and chillingly precise outcomes. Subject expired. Liver dissolved in 36 hours. No resistance. She stole the final sheet, tucked it into the lining of her violin case. But the guards found her before dawn. She was beaten, dragged to the central square. An SS officer raised his Luger. A second before he fired, a Soviet shell landed in the west yard. The camp split open. In the chaos, she ran, half-blind, bloodied, but alive. A Polish prisoner pulled her through the wire fence as bullets screamed overhead. The violin case bounced against her ribs. She did not let go. 2 days later, Sylvia Kent emerged from the woods and collapsed before a Soviet reconnaissance unit. She handed them the documents and whispered, "Raucher, Kessler, Ravensbrück." She was barely alive. She spent 6 months recovering in Lviv, then was transferred back to London. She received no public commendation. Her operation had never officially existed, but her documents would help convict 2 war criminals in absentia. Kessler was captured in Chile in 1961. Raucher was never found. Her violin case, with the bloodied music sheets still hidden inside, now rests in a locked drawer at the Imperial War Museum, unmarked, filed under anonymous civilian contributions. Sylvia Kent died in 1993. No children. No memoirs. Just a single line in a declassified SOE report. Nightingale sang until the last curtain. And in Ravensbrück, among the ruins, the echoes of that music are still said to drift on the wind. Notes not of grief, but of resistance. Paris, 1943. The city breathed beneath the boot of occupation, its cafés whispering, its street lamps dimmed, its boulevards shadowed by fear. German officers strolled the Champs-Élysées while the resistance melted into alleys, faces veiled in fog. It was a city of masks, and none wore one better than Émile Rousseau. But Émile was not his name. To the Abwehr and Gestapo, he was a French art dealer with connections to the Louvre, known for authenticating works seized for the Führer's collection. Soft-spoken, hunched, apolitical. A man who wanted only peace and paintings. To the Allies, he was Agent FR 717, codename Vermeer, the architect of Operation Stoneveil, the greatest deception scheme executed in Nazi-occupied France. His mission: convince the Nazis that the Allies planned to liberate southern France through Marseille and Toulon instead of the actual target, Normandy. Stoneveil's brilliance lay in its subtlety. There would be no fake army amassed in the south, no inflatable tanks or dummy transmissions. Just rumors. Elegant, curated rumors. Whispers passed through the art world, café chatter, theatrical circles, and forged letters intercepted with just the right level of plausibility. And at the center of it, a painting. In late spring 1943, Émile discovered a lost Caravaggio in a cellar near Toulouse. The beheading of Holofernes*, an almost mythical version long thought destroyed in a monastery fire. The Nazi Cultural Agency was elated. The Reich valued art almost as much as war. Soon, high-ranking SS officials visited Paris to examine the find. What they didn't know, the painting was a forgery, created in a London warehouse by a Belgian surrealist under British supervision. Its frame, pigments and canvas had been artificially aged using chemicals and flame. But the real deception was not in the art. It was in the crate. Embedded inside the lining were microfilmed documents, fake orders, intercepted Allied memos, maps with troop movement markings, all pointing to an amphibious invasion through the southern coast. Émile leaked the crate's route to a Gestapo contact who fancied himself an art connoisseur. The documents were found. By accident. The Germans believed they had struck gold. Within weeks, the Wehrmacht increased coastal defenses near Marseille. Tanks were diverted. Reserve units repositioned. Émile watched it all unfold while sipping espresso near the Seine, nodding politely to Nazi officers who had no idea the man they praised for his cultural loyalty was bleeding them from within. But the operation came at a cost. His courier, Celeste Duffert, a cabaret singer and resistance operative, was captured during a coded drop. She was tortured, but never revealed his identity. Her body was later found in the Seine, throat slit, her lipstick smeared into a crimson V. Émile mourned her in silence, then struck back. He planted a letter from London beneath a sculpture's base in the Palais Garnier during an SS art gala. It contained a ciphered message suggesting the Allies had infiltrated a key German intelligence officer in Lyon. It was fiction, but the fallout was real. A week of Nazi internal purges that paralyzed southern intelligence networks. As D-Day neared, Émile prepared his exit. But MI6 had one final request. One of his forged documents needed to appear genuine, not just found, but witnessed. They asked him to present it directly to an SS archivist with ties to the Führer's Atlantic Wall initiative. It was risky. If the officer caught the forgery, Émile would be executed before sunset. He agreed. They met in a small gallery near Montmartre under the pretense of cataloging Jewish looted artwork. Émile brought the document, sealed in wax and aged parchment. The officer examined it. Emile explained it had come from a resistance dealer who died before naming his source. The officer, suspicious, asked, "Why give this to me?" Emile replied, "Because I know you hate the Americans as much as I do." The lie worked. The document was filed as evidence of an imminent southern landing. That very week, Hitler approved an increase in fortifications around Toulon and ordered that 2 panzer divisions remain stationed near the Rhone, forces that would never reach Normandy in time. When the Allies stormed the beaches on June 6, 1944, Émile Rousseau stood in his Paris apartment, radio tuned low, listening to the first reports. The illusion had held. Stoneveil had succeeded. But his war was not over. 2 days later, the Gestapo raided his building. Someone had tipped them off. Emile escaped through a back stairwell, barely ahead of the boots. For weeks he hid in catacombs beneath the city, fed by resistance allies, sleeping among bones and echo. By the time Paris was liberated in August, he was a ghost. The name Émile Rousseau vanished from all post-war records. Some said he fled to Switzerland. Others believed he died in a bombing during the final weeks. But in 1972, a painting surfaced at a London auction, a modern interpretation of the beheading of Holofernes, signed only with the letter V. Inside the frame was a note, scrawled in charcoal. Asterisk, in deception, as in art, truth lies in the shadows. Asterisk. To this day, Operation Stoneveil remains one of the least documented Allied intelligence operations. But military historians agree, the weakened southern defenses and misallocated German troops contributed significantly to the success of the Normandy invasion. And it all began with a man who forged truth with a paintbrush and silence. You thought it was over. That the horrors had names, uniforms, endings. But some truths never make it into textbooks. Some ghosts never rest. And some boxes, once opened, can never be closed again. Now that you've looked inside, ask yourself, was it worth the knowing?